Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show. Yeah.
Okay, you may begin.
Thank you, Robot Lady.
No, you.
Yeah, I don't know how to kick this off. It's just Rizzle and myself, Matthew, aka Nifty Time, back at it again. I've honestly been looking forward to just shooting the shit with you again. Going back, taking back old school, how we kicked things off 3 years ago, over 3 years ago now. Just
like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, just talking about the space and all that good stuff. So, I mean, I don't know anyone else better served to kick things off than throwing the mic back to you and asking what's top of mind with you and trying to ferret out the spiciest takes you have about what's going on in crypto, NFT land, quote unquote, corporate Web3 land or whatever.
Yeah, dude, I'm like having like flashbacks of like whenever we left off with this conversation. I feel like, we were just sort of like, doing these podcasts, talking about whatever was going on in the space when it was like, super, super early, like beginning of crypto voxels type of early. And then like things started to pick up and we started doing like interviews with people. And so we sort of like, dropped the running monologue and then, had interviewed guests for a couple of years was the format of the show. And so now it sort of feels like we're just like picking up the conversation, but I'm like, oh shit, dude, that was like a conversation that feels like we just sort of like left off like 20 years ago. And like so much has changed since then. It's where to even start, man. I mean, my life is completely different than when we started doing this podcast and just like randomly like shooting the shit like about the space. But back then I was like, oh, this is cool. Yay. This is fun. Now I have somebody else to like talk about it with. And now this is like my life and my job. And, I'm very fortunate to be doing what I love. And I know it's a big, things have changed for you as well, man. It's just sort of nuts to be essentially back in the same seat in the same place where this all started before like all the madness and craziness ensued, and just be like, yo, Matt, like what's been going on out in crypto? Back then, like one thing happened each week and usually it was the whip.
Yeah, there's a metaphor in Zen Buddhism that talks about the 360-degree journey that folks sometimes are able to take in their life, where they start out, they want to go somewhere, they don't know exactly where they'll get to. They put the work in. At a certain point, they realize that they're like totally facing the opposite way that they were when they started out, and they just keep on trucking. And then they look up again and they're looking out from the same vantage point, but they look around them and everything is different. Like their whole life has changed around them. They've gotten older. The scenery, like if they're on a mountaintop, they'll see trees poking up at them that have grown up from since they began their journey. And I feel like that's pretty much where both of us are right now. If you look back at like when we started these sort of dialogues with one another about what's happening. And it's pretty special. Number one, to be able to kind of reflect on that and like notice that change and to do it with someone else, not just by yourself. I feel like I just got to shout you out, man. Like having you as my dude in this space, it's been pretty much everything. And we've been kicking all the tires, kicking ass at the same time, taking names, and growing up in the whole space. I mean, you've blown the hell up, which is so awesome to see. But I really wanted to get back to these dialogues because I feel like from our vantage point now, I feel we can offer way more insight as opposed to just talking with new projects that are popping up, interviewing them. Like there's a lot of other podcasts that have popped up in the interim that do the interview format, and that's cool for them. But I feel like with our vantage point, we can help others put on the glasses in which we use to see the space in a way that hopefully clarifies things with them. That's sort of like where I'm thinking about things with these conversations now.
Yeah. Plus, like, we don't even have to schedule anybody or like do anything. We just show up and talk. Dude, I just posted some tweet this morning and like have been sort of trying to take a step back and like, look at things like you were saying, man. And I'm like, it's so nuts when, we were having these conversations in the beginning and like sort of like the unspoken, like, and spoken sometimes. I actually remember Jim saying it like early on, like, we're out here, we're building the metaverse. Like it's a concept that we all sort of, or we thought we all sort of like had, along the same lines, and are literally, using Web3 as the building blocks to create this concept. And it's, and it's a thing. I mean, it always has been a thing, but, is continuously being like ideated on, and built upon. And it was such a slog in the beginning. And, I always remember, man, like these conversations in empty crypto voxels with like me, you, and like Josie Bellini and like DeFi Dad, and just sort of like talking about like this concept, like what all of this could be eventually. I think Easy was there too. And to see, like, to fast forward, like, then you and I interviewed a bunch of projects that were like doing adjacent things to this concept. And then Facebook was like, yeah, let's co-opt like all that shit and like pivot our business model and like try and overtake like what like we were building like this whole time from like such a early stage, specifically the Web3 model. I feel like the term metaverse has like really been watered down to, for people who are coming into the space to be synonymous with like Roblox and like all this shit. But that sort of misses the whole point of like the creator economy being like an integral part of like how the whole thing functions. And Facebook got that and they were like, yeah, let's just do that. And to think like, we were sort of fleshing out these ideas and like running these experiments in such a grassroots, like beatnik type of like level, not even that long ago. And that all of the big players came in and are now trying to do their version of that or just completely, take over that entire concept, is just like, who would have ever thought the trajectory would be like this? Maybe on a long enough continuum, but like the rapidness at which all of that occurred, and now to just be like sitting here and be like, yo, what's like going on in the space? It's like, oh yeah, last time we talked, we were like just in the beginning stages of building the metaverse, and this time around, Facebook fucking took over, and it's like, what?
Yeah, I think everyone was hoping at some point other folks in quote unquote like normie society would take note of what we're doing. But I think most of us were thinking at least like a decade out. Like the timeline was much further than it ended up being, which is like my big mind blowing moment was when I was home outside of Philly last year for Christmas and turned on KYW 1060 News Radio. And first segment I heard was talking about the metaverse. And I'm like, what in the F is going on? Like in no way, shape or form did I think in 2021, I would turn on like any given news outlet and hear folks talking about this thing called the metaverse. It's just like, it's kind of stupid. I'm like, what are they even doing? Like it was kind of crazy. But it was interesting because there was this huge tsunami of attention that washed all over Web3 and crypto and NFT land and like what we've been doing in virtual lands, like all at once, for better or worse. It washed a lot of things out in a bad way, right? I think a lot of people saw the wave as like a cash out opportunity. They rode that to wherever. A bunch of rugs happened. a bunch of folks that were in it for the community, I think, were just put off by all the attention and folks missing out on the good stuff that they've been in it for a long time. And the wave brought a whole bunch of riffraff that were trying to come in, unable to execute like even rug pulls, but just coming in trying to do something that looked like what everyone else is doing. And you sort of like just lose sight of like what actually is valuable in this space. And now that the tide is sort of receding a little bit, you're still seeing a lot more people than were here at the outset, which is interesting and good, and shows that there is real growth here for folks that are in it for more than a quick buck, right? But you're left with a very interesting state of affairs. And I think a lot of the folks that are still here, that have been here, like yourself, myself, Jin, Jimmy, a whole bunch of other folks that we just too many names to elaborate and enumerate on right now. Like now, I think we need to really think about where we are and how we move forward in a way that makes sense, and hopefully can be as inspiring for the larger number of folks that are here today than had been. What do you think?
Yeah. I feel like I overestimated or maybe underestimated the ability or the extent to which like everything would get watered down within the space, like the terminology, the ethos, like a lot of these things that, and it's probably partially my own like naivety. I really thought some of these things were like so rock solid that when the normies entered, they would sort of be rolled into the culture that we were building, rather than it would be such a tidal wave of them that everything would just get diluted. And that's sort of like what I feel like has happened. And the struggle is right now because, so it's sort of that, like when you say something that means, when you say Web3, it means something different to me and a lot of the people that were early on in the space than it does to the new people coming in. I feel like they have a completely different vantage point, viewpoint, and understandably so, because a lot of people got indoctrinated by influencers and celebrities and Bored Apes and all this stuff that like really had nothing to do with anything that anyone originally set out for, and how to like sort of walk that back or move forward in a way that like recaptures that same all that same ethos and that same concept without having to like I don't even know where you go. Do we just like come up with like all new terminology that will then just get overtaken? I feel like we've seen this, we meaning like, I guess humanity in general has seen like this type of gentrification process happen with like so many social movements, going back through history, where it's like this great grassroots thing. And then all the culture just gets adopted and diluted and becomes like, a marketing gimmick. And you hate to see that. I feel like I'm old enough that I've seen that happen a few different times towards things I was like passionate about. And it's always just sort of heartbreaking and leaves you with this like, your girlfriend just broke up with you and is never coming back type of thing. And it's like, is that the inevitable destiny here? And I don't know, man. This space has always made me more optimistic because you can lean on the tech for so many things that are uncorruptible. But we're certainly getting tested right now, meaning like the people who believe in sort of that original quest we were on.
Yeah, a few things there. Like going back to like I guess what people would call marketing terms for the space, like Web3, metaverse has become a marketing term. Even crypto has become a marketing term, or like a reverse marketing term, oddly at this point. Like I always think back to like 2019, 2020, going to like early conferences and hearing marketer folks just say, don't say crypto.
Yes. Dude, I remember this too. I think about this often.
Yeah, no one knows what an NFT is. You say a wallet and like retention drops 90% and shit like this. And then when the crowd showed up, no one cared. Everyone used those words. Web3 was sort of like an emergent thing that was easy for people to sort of grok, which was interesting. But everyone used the old terms that we were using. So any thought cycles wasted on changing the names back in the day was fucking a waste of time.
Yeah.
And the most important thing would be just to focus on the culture, the good stuff, what is fun and entertaining to folks, right? And that sort of gets to what you're talking about at the end, where things have changed. And like, especially in the context of like digital spaces and digital communities, like the concept of eternal September, which I think dates back to like early 1990s, like message board chats that were at the very beginning very small and had a very small group of very recognizable usernames. And then all of a sudden AOL came, and like these message boards were just overrun with new users who were going crazy in the chats, and the original participants felt put out so much that they just left. And what had existed there just disappeared that September when AOL went online or whatever, right? And that's sort of happened in our space. But to your point of always feeling more optimistic being here in crypto, more glass half full, like we've seen early communities, like for example, look at the artists and collectors from early super rare. Back in the day, it was like a free-for-all, very small group of folks doing their thing, creating art, collecting art for very cheap. And then the masses came and everything blew up there, and folks are still creating just at much higher sale prices, and collectors are spending and throwing around way more cash than we would have imagined, right? And there's a lot of early participants who are like, what the fuck is this? But then Tezos popped up, and Hit New in particular was like, oh, here's a new marketplace. Feels very grunge, feels very like old record story, where everything is super cheap. The artists are just minting whatever they want. The collectors are going ham. And the same sort of like early community just popped over there. A lot of the same artists from early Super went over to Hicket Nuke and then Object, and we're just doing their thing over there. So seeing that early community and a lot of those early community participants just hop over very quickly, largely intact, to a whole different blockchain, doing their thing, having that same sort of fun with it, that's really inspiring to me. And I think very different from anything we've seen on the internet previously, where something gets shut down or overrun and the whole culture disappears. Or like even in real life, like your hometown starts out small and then maybe it just blows up because the proximity to a big city, because of good schooling, and like fast forward a decade or two and it's unrecognizable from the hometown of your youth. It's so hard for you pick up and move, let alone all the folks and mates that you grew up with that made the town what it was back in the day, to grow up together and move somewhere else to start the same thing. It doesn't exist. But in blockchain, it seems like culture and community is way more portable than it has been. And that's sort of what makes me a little bit more optimistic about where we're heading.
Yeah, man. That's a really interesting point that you raised, and actually also something I've like given some thought to, because we've experienced it firsthand, man. Like, I mean, the Cent was a thriving community that we were very much prominent in, by the time Cent 2.0 rolled out or whatever, and they're still doing their thing and seemingly cool stuff. I'm like a bit out of the loop there, but that community is still largely intact, but is sort of spread across like many different communities. But you're right, man. It is really interesting. And I feel like we've seen the Tezos thing happened over at Rarible early on too. Like that was, they sort of opened the floodgates over there for artists at one point or another.
No, 100%, dude.
And and people were going nuts and just doing whatever they wanted. And it's fascinating. And it is a lot of the same names, man, who like are sort of migrating back and forth from these things, both collectors, artists, just enthusiasts or whatever. And you quantified that pretty well, man. I think, sensing that does give you some sort of hope because, I don't know, man. I started with Monoverse recently, like working with them on events and shit. And the reason I felt good about them is for the same reason I liked these things that we're talking about now, man. I see the artists going there, and that's what I love so much about crypto voxels. And it seems like so much, and same thing with Cent, man. And it seems like so much of the awesomeness of NFTs, crypto, Web3 is just really driven by artists, but somehow pre-blockchain, I feel like that was much easier to stamp out somehow, or much easier to like just sort of drown out or make people appear to be irrelevant. But we've sort of got some tech to lean on to showcase history, no matter what happens. And it's really interesting, like to see this this artist creator community, people sort of really driven to build out this creator economy. It's the same people still fighting for royalties. It's who are the same people hopping blockchains, hopping communities, running experiments, building out the metaverse. I don't really know where I'm going with this thought, man, but it's sort of just building off of what you were talking about. It is just fascinating to watch the community evolve but stay intact.
Exactly. And like dude, you're jumping over to Monoverse has me so inspired. Like thinking of Monoverse, you nailed the ingredients in terms of how I see them. It's like half of what Cent was, half of what made CryptoVoxels so exciting. It's that interesting mixture of all the artists, the creators, the builders, the explorers, the folks that were willing to take those early chances on new projects, all seem to be coming together at Monoverse. And a lot of the old familiar names that we're used to from Cent, from like bumping into folks in CryptoVoxels during all the early WIP meetups, right? Like the community is largely intact, and there's folks that we may not see every week, but because of our interactions, because of all the gift giving that we've done through the WIP, like all the NFTs, like our wallets are forever linked. And you see these folks and their ENS handles pop up other places, and it's like you're going to the neighborhood store or whatever, picking up like a Coke or what have you, and it's like, oh, there's Josie Bellini or Andrew Steinwald. Hey, how you doing? Hey, see ya. And it's just, we're all here together, even if the space has exploded, even if there's more people, even if from time to time, like bull runs, like our like summer season at the shore, and so many people just show up and it's like, what the hell is going on? But still, the tech, our history that we've imprinted on the blockchain really adds this different layer. It makes things at least stickier, and for participants, myself, just speaking from my own experience, easier to identify everyone in a way that, I mean, if you're going from a different platform to a different platform in quote unquote like Web2 land, maybe you'll recognize the same handles of other people, but it's way more difficult there. And obviously handles get scooped up really quickly, and it's very different than like an ENS handle that people can just hold on to. And as long as a new project in the blockchain world supports it, you can see that handle multiple different sites without fail, right? I think there's a lot to like these very core fundamental bits of tech that projects over time have started adding in and incorporating more as table stakes, that are creating a whole different context for digital living. And that's a huge departure from everything that we've known in terms of our digital lived experiences on the internet to date, which is, I don't know, fucking mind blowing for me personally.
You should know I'm an ENS hater. but I'm also not disagreeing with the concept of what you're saying. But
hold on, why are you an ENS hater?
Dude, I think their subscription model is bullshit, dude. I'm like, that is some Web3 trash or Web2 trash that should never enter the space. And so I never supported them, but always regretted it after the airdrop. I'll tell you that much. But I also don't like how you sort of get doxed on Etherscan, like web wallet docs on Etherscan with the ENS. Like I feel like some people think that's cool, but also I don't necessarily always want someone knowing that it's me buying, selling, transacting things or whatever. And so, so anyway, man, I get the purpose of ENS and also think it's a cool concept, but also fuck their subscription model. But dude, but scratching on what you're saying, man, like the exciting part we're at now is that people are starting to execute some of the stuff that we had been talking about for like a long time. Like, Monoverse Monoverse stuff talks to Webiverse stuff, and their stuff talks to Museum of Crypto Art stuff, and that stuff talks to Hyperfly stuff. And so we had always sort of kicked around this concept of interoperability in early days, and all sort of working together to build out this concept of interoperability. But in early days, it always sort of felt very like tribal in terms of like, there was like a Decentraland camp and there was like a CryptoVoxels camp, and there was always like some overlap or whatever. But to see the, sort of original pioneers in the space now actually working on separate projects, but working to make those separate projects compatible and interoperable with each other. I'm like, dude, this is the shit that we were talking about building, and now it's actually happening. And that's another thing that gives me hope, is that there doesn't appear to be those like tribal lines in terms of like building out this bigger vision. Like the people who genuinely wanted to genuinely are doing that, without trying to build silos and everything. And that's fucking cool.
Agreed. And I wish there was more collaboration amongst projects, right? But still, on the whole, I think you are seeing early signs, or at least more collaboration amongst like what otherwise would be ostensibly like competitors, or even are competitors, like by definition, competing for their slice of whatever we're building. But I think there's this shared sense of understanding for the most part that we need to work together for certain things, at least early on. My hope is that understanding grows, the shared tools grow in a way that benefits the users as much as like the companies and projects that are innovating and adding those new like shared tools and integrations and things like that. Because that's what makes the space so interesting to me personally, is this ability to take your history with you, this ability to, like, what you're talking about, I think is really interesting. It's not just like the community members and participants communicating with one another. It's the sites, it's the tools, it's the network, it's like the infrastructure communicating with one another in a sense, which I think is kind of mind-blowing versus what you get in the past, where it's like maybe everyone, or maybe sites use Stripe, which is sort of like a financial communication layer, but like not really, and very siloed, and like information pretty much goes one way from the site over to Stripe. That sort of like site by site, project by project, infrastructure layer communications has never really existed for the most part. I guess outside of like the TCP IP actual like internet protocol layer, but that's like very, very far down the stack.
Yeah, I really hope it will be sort of like a Blender situation. I did like an intro to Blender thingy this morning, and I'm like, Blender is, Blender, it's like a, you can build avatars or like, video game shit or whatever on it. It's insanely complicated, but also very cool. Actually, dude, the CryptoVoxels wearable situation helps significantly with Blender. I did the intro thing, and it was fascinating to see that all this time I spent fucking around with wearables and like using those goofy things to slide them around and rotate and expand, like translates perfectly into Blender that uses like all the exact things. I was like, oh man, this is fucking great. I spent years fucking trying to get a shoe to fit on my avatar. And that actually, the skill translates. But it's crazy. You know, Blender's a free tool. And it's become the dominant tool for people to use. And it's crazy that, you know, that cat is so far out of the bag in terms of like, you know, people put out like a polished product and sell it, but the skill that you need is to be able to use Blender. And so I sort of hope in like a similar way that like these tools that everyone's building out, you know, quote unquote, building the metaverse or building out Web3, you know, become so ubiquitous and like open source that it almost doesn't even make sense to use anything else because that stuff is so far ahead and it has the, you know, the community support. And, you know, I feel like we're just starting to see it with like .vrm avatars and stuff like, you know, where there's now, you know, at this point, a whole lot of things that you can use them for, like a whole lot of different platforms. You know, games are out there and continuing to come out and everything. So, you know, now if you're in the business of building avatars, it's enough to say to yourself, like, well, if I want my thing to be as widely used as possible or have as much exposure as possible, like this is the path forward that, you know, is dominant and that is good. Like that's what we want and plays right into like this whole concept of what we're building. And so I hope, and I think, you know, that will happen eventually because it is desirable to people, but it's how to, again, onboard or explain this to people who have been fed this watered down, or you know, version of it and don't even really know what they're missing or why they should miss what they're missing. It's fascinating, man, to like browse Reddit periodically. And, you know, that's in like 2012, 2013. That's where I like really learned about crypto and like the idiocy and like hatred towards like crypto and NFTs now is like, it's such a reverse course from like what the community used to be over there. But I feel like it's largely like indicative of the mainstream like view of all of this. So it's like, you know, first time around, the problem was onboarding people. Now it seems like onboarding wasn't really the problem. It's like messaging or like, you know, how to explain this again. I don't even know.
Yeah. I mean, I want to dig into what you've been doing in Blender. So like first quick question is, and selfish question, are you able to take my CryptoVoxels avatar and just like create a VRM of it so I can import it into, for example, like Mooniverse, and I can just have this same visual like avatar world to world, as long as those worlds support VRM?
Is it possible? Yes. Do I know how to do it yet? No.
Dude, I'm going to ask everyone I meet, I swear to God, until I meet the person that can do that for me today. And I'm just going to be like, boom, do it. That's because
there's a Vox converter in the pipeline. So, both in general and in Mooniverse. I don't know what the ETA is, but it might be like, you know, by the time we record the next episode where, you know, people will be able to import a .vox model and it'll spit out a .vrm or GLB or whatever you need. And I mean, who wouldn't have thought that was coming anyway? Like, you know, anytime I got to post something on Twitter, I'm like, you know, whatever the thing is that pops up first on Google, I'm like, convert this thing to a, you know, GIF. So of course all that shit will eventually come out. But yeah, man, it is cool, man. It's intuitive enough if you know about the CryptoVoxels, you know, how to play around with that to get in there and start goofing around with things. But once you like start digging in of what you can really do with that, I'm like, dude, you could get lost in here for like a month and still be learning.
Yeah. But I mean, the avatar layer, like these virtual worlds, that's what I'm sort of most excited to see if it gets built out and developed on, because just from like week in, week out, going into like, for the most part, up until recently into crypto voxels, where folks have their established sort of avatar, like their visual like embodiment of who they are in virtual form. It's so cool to be able to recognize people just by how they look, not just a name tag above their head. It creates this whole different feeling of familiarity and family and just community that hasn't really existed. I mean, PFPs on Twitter, everywhere, like to an extent, but it's very different from like seeing folks actually move and jump and like all that good stuff. So we'll be interested as the especially Mooniverse in particular, because they're just fucking killing it. And this is no show. I'm not part of Mooniverse like Rizzle is. Everything I say about Mooniverse is totally show free, just coming from the heart. What they're doing is really exciting, and the way that they've been incorporating NFTs is just like the perfect blend. So I'm just curious and super excited to see how the identity layer will evolve over time with these avatars that also can be ownable and sellable, which creates this whole other segment of like virtual digital craftsman or craftswoman, to pull on a phrase that I used to describe the old no shot of old.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right though, dude. That's like, if there's anything that CV really got right, their approach to wearables from jump was brilliant. I mean, they really just let anyone do whatever they want, and are reaping the benefits of that to this day. I mean, like, it's just, and it didn't even matter that it looked, janky or voxely or whatever, but like, just like you were saying, man, I got like a pair of shoes from No Shot. I got a shirt from Skeeny. I got a mohawk from Angie Taylor. I got all this cool shit that I can like customize my person with. And then if you show up somewhere, people recognize, that, shoes from Pixels, shirts from the Whip, like, all of these.
Your big ass caterpillar from
Fabiano. Yeah, man. And, all of these things that, both are from friends and cool people, but also like, have memories involved with them from events and everything. And so it's something that I feel like it's really difficult to explain to people how rich that culture is if you haven't like experienced it firsthand. But like, seriously, man, I feel like you should see my wardrobe in real life, man. You've met me a couple times. I wear like, old jeans and like hoodies mostly, but my fucking metaverse wardrobe is like tight, dude. Like all my shit is from like famous artists and everything. And that's fucking cool. And, I don't know. I imagine I feel about that the way someone who is very fashion conscious in real life feels. That just doesn't really happen to be me. But that thing, they really got that right, man. Like from jump.
Yeah, I feel like there's just not a lot of people that know the value yet because they haven't experienced it yet. Like we are still amongst a very small group of folks that actually use these projects and live in them. Right? Like at least once a week, and you definitely much more, right? So I think talking about the feeling, the experience, and sharing that as widely as possible is what has been missing, because simply folks have not lived it and not experienced it and not felt it. But once you hear someone talk about it, you're like, damn, I hear the tone of their voice. Like they're sincere as fuck. Like, okay, let me try it out. Right? I feel like that's what I wanted to get back with these conversations, because when we were talking about crypto voxels back in the day, when we were talking about collecting the art and things like that, there's a lot of people that listened to us before they were in the space and they heard how we were talking about it. And that was their red pill. That's all they needed to dive into everything that's going on.
Crazy to think.
That's it.
Yeah, dude. That's it. I mean, undeniably, this is fun, man. It's nice to get back to this. I feel like it sort of helps me like roll some ideas around my head that I've been thinking about too, man. So, let's not invite anybody else for a while. How about that?
yeah, you heard that the world. The invite list is closed. It's just Rizzle and I are going to be partying. Wow,
awesome, cool. Man. Well, cool. We wrap it here, and until next time.
Cool. Later, brother.
Later, man.